Hi, my name is Jessica, and you might know me from my other channel, but today we are discussing plastic canvas. So on here I go by, Canvas Queen. If you're looking for me online, just type in Canvas Queen at Wix.com. You might be able to find me. Okay, so today we're actually learning two pieces of stitch. Now, this, is plastic canvas. That's actually the large sheets. They also have smaller sheets that are a lot smaller. I've worked a project on this when I started it. So today we're actually going to work on single stitch and long stitch. So short stitch and long stitch. Now, we're getting close here. Now these here you need special needles. They are a little bit larger, and you can see that they're pretty sturdy. They hold yarn. You can usually get these at Hobby Lobby, Michael's. Usually 2 to 3 of them for probably about $3. So they're about $1 a piece. Okay, plastic canvas costs you between 69 cents and $2 depending on the size sheet. And if you get stiff, which this is flimsy, the stiff is actually a little bit better depending on the project you're wanting to do. Now, if you're wanting to do like a box or a tub or something, I would go with flimsy. If you're doing something like wall art, I would suggest maybe doing a little stiffer canvas. It works a little better. So, single stitch. Now you have your stitches, you count here. These are called 10 count stitches. I'm using 10 mesh here. And on this here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. 6 squares actually does 5 stitches. And for a stitch, you go in and you come out the one diagonal from it. That's a single stitch. Now, single stitches are actually great for when you're wanting to do detail work. If you're wanting if you have less details, so let's say hair or fur on an animal, you would do shorter stitches. Here, I'll do one more row here, and I'll show you the difference between short and long stitch here. So, on the short stitches, like I said, it's very detailed work. Plastic canvas is a lot like cross stitch. As a matter of fact, I use cross stitch books whenever I'm making really large patterns. I just finished up a Viking Queen that stands 6 foot tall, so it really does make a big difference. Now, and you'll see here, there we go. All right. Now this is just 3 simple little rows of small stitch. And here we go. You see how you can see each detailed stitch. It's a lot easier, and it works really, really well. Now, on the other hand, you got long stitch. Now, long stitch, you have choices. You have either 3 count. Now, 3 count goes over diagonal. You go 1. You skip this one here, and you go here. And you got a long stitch. Now, that's a 3 count stitch. And I'll do a row of those real quick. And you'll see the difference between single stitch and 3 row. Now there is no double stitch because a double stitch is using 2 squares, which the single stitch actually uses 2 squares. And there we have triple stitch or 3 square stitch. Now our next one, of course, is just a little bit bigger. It's 4 square stitch. And it just means you skip over here and here, and you go in there. And, you know, it's a little less detailed. Do a couple of them here. That way you can see. There we are. And that there. Now, you're probably asking how you square them up. When you're squaring them up, you go from a 4 square stitch down to, say, a 3 square, and then down to a 2 square stitch. Now that easily goes and squares up your project, if you have a square in your project that needs to be squared up. Now, not exactly very hard to do. We'll actually be discussing that when we start actually sewing a project, so it'll be a little easier. But I will show it real quick. There's your 4 stitches. Now, as you can see, you know, you can get 5 stitches in on this one, but you only get 4 here. Now here, you're doing 4 squares, but you only get 3 stitches in. Well, actually, yeah, 3 stitches in. So you would do, and I'm using a different color yarn here so you can see this, a 3 stitch right underneath it, and then a single regular basic single stitch, or 2 stitch if you want to call it that. And notice that now you have a square. Well, part of a square. I haven't done the top part. But, you know, you get the idea. Our next one, now you can do those, you can do long stitches between 3 stitches and 10 stitches. I don't usually recommend a 10 stitch long stitch, only because of the fact that it kind of makes them a little wobbly. You know, your canvas gets a little stretched thin, if you might want to call it that. So, let's see here. This, a little bit bigger canvas. Show you what I'm talking about here. I'm actually going to do a 10 stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 stitches. Okay, and you can see here, it's just, now, anytime you're doing long stitch like this here, please do not forget, you got the back. This is the back of your canvas. Now, there's 2 different ways of doing this. I'm going to do a couple here the way that long stitch should be done, which means on the front, and there's your back. Okay, now, a lot of people think, well, that wastes a lot of string. And it does. Another solution, here's the back, is when you come out the back, go in the square right next to it. Okay? Now, this leaves no stitch on the one side, but then on the front, you do your regular stitch, and again, on the back, stitch right next to it, pull in, come to the front, and then on the front, you look like this, but on the back, all you have is these very tiny little stitches here. And that's great as long as you stay under 10 stitches. Some people do go 15, 20 stitches, and if you do that, you really have to be careful because the strings get a little bit, you know, you have to see the double stitch on it. Here on the front, you can see the texture of it. Now, this is really thin, but you can see the difference between the single and the double. The single, or the single-sided, is a little bit thinner. Now, you can see right here, you know, you pull it apart, you can see canvas. But here, it's a little less likely to see the canvas because you have the stitches underneath it. Now, one other thing, when you're doing long stitches and you finish a project, you want to bring your thread right through the middle of your canvas and loop right over the top of your piece of thread on the front and tack it down. Now, you can't really see your stitch there, but it does help, especially if you're using single-sided canvas. And let's see here. Whoop. Here we go. And right across and tack it down. Now, the tack here, I'll pull it up close so you can see it tacked down. It doesn't show up very easily. It doesn't be seen, but it really does help keep your canvas string very nice and neat and organized. So, today we discussed our stitches. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about how to cut your canvas for a project. And hopefully if you have any questions, you will let me know. Now, like I said, this is plastic canvas. Later on in our series, we're going to be doing on how to actually do a project. One of our simple projects that we're going to do is making a hair barrette. Yeah, I look like I could really use one, right? Trust me, it gets out of hand sometimes. But that'll be our simple projects. Then we're going to be doing a medium project, probably a small box or something. And then I'm going to show you how to do larger projects. And even walk through you the whole step of each day, adding in, and how to sew your project together. So I do hope you actually stick with me and we all have some fun with this. If you have questions on making arts and crafts, we're also going to be doing beadwork, probably some crocheting, some knitting, a little bit of everything. So if you have a question about arts and crafts, or you want to learn how to do a project, leave me a message and I will give you some tips and pointers or whatever you need. So thank you. This is Jessica, and I will see you again tomorrow.